Well, see, you're kind of not in the group that I would consider people who would struggle with going through a diversity training. But from my perspective, there are people who do not want to be convicted by what they may learn, specifically either implicit bias or just understanding that if you go through an implicit bias test or understand diversity training, they may feel offended, they may feel attacked because they do some of the things that they say someone of prejudice does. Um, the fact that Trump of all people is the one who took it out of law, who took the requirement away, is he would benefit the most from having it. Granted, he probably would not stick through one because everything they say might be about him. He would be the one to benefit the most from it. So from my perspective is he's trying to, in a sense, save or assist the people who would be I wouldn't even say ridiculed, literally be convicted. Like what's being said, they would be the ones that's being talked about. And people see that as always a bad thing. It's I don't want they're talking about me. I don't want to feel as if I'm being attacked by someone who thinks they know it all or something like that.
That's why you think that I think that it's a bad idea.
Yes.
So I would say
for you, it's for the perspective of someone else. But go ahead.
Sure. So I would say that I don't care whether or not people are offended by what they're learning there. Mm-hmm. I don't think it has nothing to do with the material of what's there. Although I will say some of the stuff, like I saw one video on Twitter where this lady was in like doing this training, and she literally stands up and she's like, all white people are racist, and they're just sitting there. And it's like, maybe, but like also, like, how are you just gonna, like, on what grounds? But so if it's material like that, then I have an issue with the material, but that's a different sort of discussion. So I would say it has less to do with the material and less to do with the people that are actually attending these trainings, and more to do with the fact that it's like once the first one starts, and I know people say this, a version of this sort of argument, it gets thrown out there, kind of like with taxes. And people are like, oh, the government's stealing your money, the government's involved, the government's this, government's that. So it kind of is like that, but it's a little, there's like a little tweak on it. And so I would say it's the fact that once the government says that you have to, it's like imposing a thought onto an individual. And ideally what you'd have in that situation is you'd weed out the people who actually think those things based on conversations, and like, you know, that this person is in the hiring process, and like you figure it out, and then you don't have to, like, you just don't even hire them, right? And then they have to change in order to get hired.
What do you mean?
Like, if I know that such and such person is racist and nobody's going to hire them to get a job, they have to figure it out. And that's like societal influence that you would want to make that change, rather than like a mandatory training from a government legislated body saying you have to think this way. Does that make sense?
Yes and no. My issue with that is I don't think it's there. For one, the people already hired. It's for government. It's for federal and state government staff. So if you worked for any department like of health or Department of Labor, you would go through these trainings. Two, it's not. The thing about diversity training is it's not going to change the way you think. Period. Like the idea that you going through this training is going to challenge the way you think. It's not. It happens. I mean,
well, then what's the point of doing it?
I mean, because there are some people who benefit from it at the end of the day. The thing about it is, this is something that we talked about through the Multicultural Center, was if you put on a training event or if you put on any type of roundtable discussion and you don't help, and if no one gets it but one person, you've done your job. If no one leaves the room, if only one person leaves the room saying, you know what, I never saw these things that way, I'm glad I came to this, you've done your job. If out of 100 people, that one person is the only one who says, thank you for putting this on, I did not see these things, you've opened my eyes to a new perspective of things I didn't even realize, it's mission complete. because that one person can then go on to help more people. The idea of diversity training is simply there to try and assist people in understanding that their own implicit bias may then hinder their ability to have good relationships, actually try and assist people the correct way. It could even help in corporate business. Your implicit bias may lose you a deal. You may say a microaggression to someone who's trying to work with you as a client that offends them. You don't even know you've offended them. And then they say, you know what, I think I'm gonna take my business somewhere else. It only helps people to learn the information. If it's good diversity training, that's the caveat. You said whether or not what the quality of it.
So I agree. My issue is not with like, if somebody wants to come do diversity training at my company, like I'm not gonna be like, no. Mm-hmm. If it is in law that you have to do it, that's where it's like, because right now, why is it being done? It's being done to protect against lawsuits.
I don't think it is.
You don't think so?
No.
Why?
For now, you talking in terms of your company or in terms of the federal government?
If a company did it, it would be to protect against a lawsuit. And so maybe
think about it is the idea of business it's beyond just like immediate. Businesses are international. They're multicultural. You may go to China and have to speak with someone over there. Getting diversity training just expands your knowledge about what it means to be in someone else's shoes, period. I can't tell you what it means to be in a Hispanic person's shoes, about saying, trying to say hola instead of hello when you're speaking to a Spanish person. As soon as you see their Spanish, you assume that they know Spanish, so you say hola. Mm-hmm. That's very, very offensive to someone. Do I see it that way? No. Do I say it? I've been caught saying it myself, yes, to certain people, only if they've said it to me or if I know they speak Spanish fluently. But if you go into a conversation like that, or if you get introduced to another Spanish person, or let's say I introduce you to someone who's Spanish, and I say he's from, Dominican Republic, and you say, oh, cool, I visited there, da, 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 da. And then you say something that's, culturally appropriated, or you assume that he can speak this, or you assume he likes something like this, that could then immediately skew the relationship off the jump. Your first impression is now, it's not on a good footing. And my idea for putting this in a corporate setting is simply that person may be let's say you're an investment company and you're seeking to try and get this brand sold to this one company, and that person is the person you're being from the company. You doing anything like that can then blow the entire deal. You don't work. I don't think you work in marketing or sales like that. But for portions of the company in that area, that can be the number one thing that makes a better salesman or a better marketing person from someone who isn't. If I've been quote unquote diversity trained, because like I said, the quality of your diversity training does matter. But let's say you've been to plenty of diversity trainings across a broad spectrum of different cultures versus someone who's been in the game for 10 years in South Carolina, who's worked with the same company and only spoke with people within he's going to have trouble trying to speak with people who live in Pakistan or someone who works in Vietnam, because they don't understand what it means to talk to someone from that region.
I agree. And
the issue, like you said, is only when you're forced to do it.
That's the problem. I'm good. Like if you're going to come tell me hey man, you should be respectful of this. And you should probably know that this person, this is a thing in this culture, or whatever, I'm good with it. Right. It doesn't have to do with it doesn't have to do with what it is. It's once you put it into law, it's okay, fine. Who defines what good diversity training is? Mm. Do you have to write on, take a little quiz to say that you are now a diverse, minded individual? Mm. Where does that go? Mm. And so people, and one of the things is even with you, mm. you're trying to convince me that it's a good thing. Mm. And I'm not. I agree with you. Mm. It's
and an issue is being forced to go through the training. That's
right. That's the thing.
I guess my counter question to you would be: so if this was something that the owner of a company mandated and made it required, because it's the private sector and it's his company, and mm-hmm. Would you be cool with that?
Yeah, because it's his company. He can do whatever he wants.
So.
And you choose, because I can leave. Mm-hmm. I can say I don't want to work here anymore.
You can. If the thing about it is, the thing about the training in Trump's law was it's only for federal and state employees. So technically, you could quit. You can leave that state or federal department. You don't have to stay. You get what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, if that's the case, then it's fine. right. But it's like as soon as that goes, and then it's like now everyone ever has to do it.
Think about it. You can look at something here in Virginia. So on July 1st, state agencies can no longer test for THC on drug and like on screenings for jobs.
Mm-hmm.
The sector does not have to abide by that whatsoever.
Right.
If I go and apply to a state job down in Richmond, they can't necessarily test me, or excuse me, not for marijuana. Excuse me. I think it's the felony box. State departments and state agencies, whatever you want to call them, they can't ask that on a federal application.
Mm-hmm.
Private companies still can. So regardless of what the state did, the state can create all of these mandates and all of these systems for state jobs because that is the domain that they own. The reason the private sector, and that's the way that this country was set up, the reason of the private sector is they only have to abide by regulatory laws. That wasn't a regulatory law that was put in place. That was specifically for the construct of the federalist.
Maybe that's my misunderstanding then. What I read was that it was put in place for that with the intention of becoming regulatory law.
Because think about it, you can't regulate it. Like a private company does, they can say they do it, but a diversity training may just be a PowerPoint or a TED Talk. At the end, it all depends on what the company sees as necessary. So like internationally, globally minded, sales or investing company, they may put, $250,000 into diversity training so that way their people are actually trained in it versus someone who really only deals with people who live in their state or within their, let's say the East Coast.
Yeah.
They need to spend that much money on diversity. It's pretty the same in America.
Facts. I feel so that was my misunderstanding then. But even so, the point, so like if they want to like to make it mandatory for federal employees only, then like it's fine. If they want to do that, that's fine. But the point, the principle though of what I was saying still stands as far as legislating that sort of thing.
And you're using people's perspective on what is and what isn't good.
Yeah, exactly. Like,
that makes sense.
It needs to be like a collective, like all of us think this is not good. Just like one person decided that it wasn't good and then wrote it down and now everybody has to do it. It's like not the, I don't know. This like when I reading the Federalist Papers and reading the writings and like going through history and that sort of stuff, like in the way that I do, the more and more that I read, the more and more I would rather have the government have as little control as possible over my life, to be honest. But I don't know. So, but yeah, diversity training as a whole, like like we were saying, as long as it's done correctly, it's like definitely people could benefit from that because the true, I'll say, diversity training really only comes with exposure to other people. Like you have to spend time with those people and learn, because even if it's like some guy coming in and saying like, hey, people from this culture don't like this, and then you go like ask them and they're like, where did he get that? like to really have that happen, it only comes from being exposed to people of those cultures and actually learning and talking to them, saying like, hey, like sometimes people make mistakes, right? Like I'll talk to somebody and I'll say something and I had no idea, but like then assuming you're friends with that person, you've already built a relationship and and they know that you didn't mean it in the way that it is in their culture. They'll be like, hey man, next time don't say that. And then it's like, okay, it's done and you learned. And that's really the only way to get like true sort of diversity education, I guess you could say. Like the diversity training is kind of like, it's a poor substitute almost, but like definitely I still understand the benefits for it. And definitely think that people would benefit if they do certain things, but I don't know.